Now, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has urged mainstream parties not to lend support to the Alternative for Germany, the first far-right party projected to win a state election since the Second World War. The AfD appears to have done well in Thuringia and also in Saxony. Other parties have said they won't help it form a governing coalition. Let's speak to our correspondent in Berlin, Damien McGuinness. Damien, just explain what the results have been.
So what we've seen in Thuringia is that the AfD has won the most votes, which is around 33%, getting in the end a third of all seats of the parliament. And in Saxony, they came a close second, but also have ended up with pretty much almost a third of the seats in parliament. So both results are seen as historic. That's why the AfD is celebrating. Of course, this leads to a political problem in Saxony itself, because even though no other party will work with the AfD, because it's seen as so extreme and some of the leaders are seen as so toxic, so that means they won't get into government, but it'll make forming a coalition government very difficult because the other parties will find it very hard to cobble together a majority. You're going to have some very uncomfortable alliances with, for example, conservatives having to come together with radical leftists, which they wouldn't usually do. And then nationally, it's going to have a big impact because the three parties in Olaf Scholz's national governing coalition were really punished at this election. And for many people, it was a real signal to Berlin that they're not happy in this government. So on the ground, it's going to have an effect politically, but also nationally. And of course, next year we have national elections here in Germany. So that's why this is something that all the parties are looking closely at what's been happening in Eastern Germany in those regional elections with great worry, because it means that they're going to not have an easy ride over the next year in the run up to these elections next year.
What precisely are the AfD calling for? What are some of their policy ideas?
Well, the AfD is a broad church, so it ranges from people who would describe themselves as conservatives, concerned about migration, right through to people who we know are neo-Nazis. The leader of Thuringia, the leader there, Björn Höcke, has been fined a number of times for using Nazi slogans at rallies. He has been defined by courts as a fascist. And in this region, you have some of the most radical elements within the AfD. The AfD as a party is so extreme that Marine Le Pen's party in France will not work with them on a European level. So this is a very radical party, particularly in Eastern Germany. And what they really stand for is an anti-migrant stance, but particularly an anti-Islam stance. And they go beyond just wanting to control the number of refugees and asylum seekers who come to Germany. They want to close all borders. They want to leave the EU. They want to get rid of the euro. And some of the members of this party do say things which I think we can interpret as being anti-Islam and sometimes homophobic, xenophobic. It's a deeply problematic party, particularly there in Thuringia. And of course, that has an impact for people living there. So not just politically, but for people from ethnic minorities, for Jewish groups, for all sorts of people who are now worried about their safety, because what the AfD says in rallies has now been confirmed at the ballot box. So, a lot of people are expressing real fears about what that means for their daily lives.
Damien McGuinness in Berlin, thanks very much indeed. Well, staying in Berlin, I'm joined by Markus Zehner, a professor teaching political theory, amongst other subjects, also a non-resident fellow of the German Marshall Fund of the US. Markus Zehner, in terms of the significance of this, how important are these results and why are we seeing these results in these two states in particular? Why so much support in Thuringia and Saxony?
Well, I think there is a couple of factors in play. In particular, when we look into the East, the two parties, the AfD, which was mentioned before, and also the BSW, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, an alliance of a former left politician, they both are capturing a certain mood, trying to convey a East German sentiment, East German nostalgia for even the GDR, the former East German socialist part of Germany. So I think this was the one part. And secondly, of course, it was about migration. In particular, in the eastern part of Germany, people believe that we have too many migrants and that we have to put a stop to that. I think this is one of the two of the biggest issues.
And just tell me about those populations in those two states of Germany. I mean, what is the wealth and the education of that population? Is there a big migrant population there?
Actually, when it comes to migrants, there are not that many migrants in the eastern part. So it's kind of an irony that in particular in the eastern part of Germany, where we don't find that many migrants, people are voting more strongly against having migrants in Germany or more migrants in Germany. This is the one thing. And secondly, when it comes to the wealth and how well off are people in the East, of course, I mean, there's a structural disadvantage here at play in the East. People who used to live in the former GDR are not as well off as in the western part. And look at how much money is inherited from one generation to the next. 90% actually of everything that's inherited to the next generation that happens in the western part of Germany, not in the eastern part. So there's a structural disadvantage and people feel like they are left behind. But this is only part of it. I think there are more things here at play. And if you look at Russia and the sympathy for Russia, there's a nostalgia for the life that used to be. And people are, I think, forgetting how life under GDR oppression really was.
Just finally, what does this mean, do you think, for national elections coming up and the overall sort of political mood in Germany now?
Yeah, on the one hand, one can say, well, this is only a small part of people in Germany. I mean, if we're talking about the two states where we have seen elections yesterday, and the one is coming up, Brandenburg, in 3 weeks. This only makes up for less than 10% of the whole population of Germany. So probably we should not exaggerate. On the other hand, if we look at Berlin, and as it was mentioned earlier, for the coalition that's ruling in Berlin, this was a heavy blow because they were way below 20% in put all together, all the three parties together. So for Olaf Scholz, looking at the elections in next year, I think he will really have a hard time to maintain as a candidate for the Social Democrats because he has no leadership qualities and he has not really charisma that kind of would carry the SPD, the Social Democratic Party, over the finishing line.
Okay, Professor Markus Siener, thank you very much indeed.